between here and Teton Valley, I can either go north around the hills, south around the hills, or over the hills. Right now, I'm planning to go north around so that I'm not up on top of something when the weather turns bad. And so that I don't risk damaging this cart, because a lot of my fortunes are riding on this thing holding up for another good few hundred miles at least. I might be able to get a glimpse of the Tetons if the weather turns out to be good.
What I really wanted was to hike into the mountains, but I just learned that right-wing politicians had shut down the federal government, and all the national parks along with it.
Yeah. Something's gone wrong with one of my wheels, with the wheels wobbling really loosely. It looks like somehow one of the bushings is not where it should be. It's about 30 miles from here to Tetonia. If I don't make it to Tetonia today, I'm probably not going to be able to see the Tetons. The wind is picking up, the temperature is plummeting. If you need any hail, I've got extra. I could lend you some. Here it is, the Great Teton Valley, which, if anything were visible on the other side, would be one of the great vistas of this entire trip. So, having just made a trip to the hardware store, I'm now in a position to hopefully get these new wheels on in place of the old ones on the cart, and also got some new bushings, and also replacement bearings.
I had my good weather, and I wasn't about to waste it. If I left the cart in the valley, I could hike up to Hurricane Pass on the crest of the range. It would be 18 miles in and more than 4,000 feet up in the new fallen snow. How often do you get a chance like this?
Okay, it's 4 p.m. There are maybe 4.5 hours of daylight left in places that catch the sun. That does not include any of these canyons.
18 miles in, 18 miles out. No bears. Bright stars. The night rolled ahead of me and I crossed under the Milky Way. On my return to civilization, I made a momentous discovery. A second-hand steel-framed bicycle trailer with 20-inch wheels. I had no good way of pushing or pulling it, and instantly putting all my faith in it seemed rash. So I loaded the old cart bodily into the new one and pressed on south.
I remember back when I was first planning this trip, there was a spell where I thought I could get away with doing this whole trip pushing one of those portable folding luggage carts to carry on airplanes. 4-inch wheels, 2-inch clearance above the ground, lots of plastic. Look at me now.
In the Swan Valley, I passed a building flying a white supremacist Civil War flag. I just learned that another cross-country walker had been killed by a semi in Colorado. His name was Joe Bell. He was from a town I went through in Oregon. I wondered what his last seconds were like.
This is about as nerve-wracking as it gets. It's not like this is physically difficult, but it just grates away at your nerves constantly. And occasionally it does get physically difficult because if there's a stretch coming up where there's a guardrail on either side and not much of a shoulder, and there are curves in the road that you can't see around, you kind of just have to put your head down and run for it and hope that you get to the other side before a semi comes around the corner. It'd be easier if you could hear, but often in country like this, a blind corner is also a deaf corner. Alpine, Wyoming. The gas station had a shower stall that had been converted into a condom dispenser, and the local discount liquor store is having a gun raffle. This is the Wild West. It's the first town that I've gone through where attached to the gas station is a gun shop. Alpine Standard, it can do your AR-15s and AK-47s. And I checked out their webpage earlier because I was trying to see if they might be able to sell me a deer cart before I found my bike trailer. And they have a picture of a .50 caliber machine gun. The sheriff just pulled me over. Not astride a gleaming horse, but inside a gleaming pickup, which is pretty much the present day equivalent. Crew cut, mirror, sunglasses, cool as a cold beer. He said that he'd been receiving calls saying that there was a strange person walking down the side of the road. He came over to check it out. But as far as he could see, I wasn't trying to hitch a ride, and I wasn't causing anyone any trouble, so it was okay.
People offered me rides. People gave me their food. One man offered me a job fixing car windshields. People gave me shelter. I stayed with an engineer whose favorite authors included Steinbeck, Dumas, and Dickens. He said he had books instead of hunting trophies, but the idea was the same. People prayed over me. My girlfriend got a job in Scotland.
It's been strange walking along, being in such close and consistent contact with people. Close friends, family, strangers. I don't entirely like the feeling of being tied to the phone and the computer while I'm traveling this way. I can feel how far away I am from everything. The only way I'm able to get up this road with the cart is that it's the new cart and it has the 20-inch wheels. If I were still on the hand truck tires, The last few miles with the mud and the rocks and the slope would have been interminable. Presumably I have to go up over the crest of that ridge at some point. It's snowy up there.
Higher on the mountain, I met two hunters in the snow, crouched over a fire. They told me there were wolves in the area, and as I pushed higher and deeper into the ice and the light waned, I turned this warning over in my mind. I'd been surrounded by wild dogs before, so the images in my mind were distinct. On the far side of the ridge, the only way I could keep the cart from sliding away and dragging me off the road was to muscle it through the newer snow, laboring down into a dark white well. I woke confused in the night, unable to feel my toes, and did crunches in my sleeping bag to keep from freezing. Hey, my love. I just got home. I think we could be happy there. You don't seem to be online. Good luck with the repairs. Speak soon. I love you. I wish you were here with me. By this point, I'd been pushing the new cart for a week. It had its own problems, but it wasn't falling apart, and now it had a lawnmower handle welded on, so I could push it by itself. In Montpelier, the manager of the grocery store introduced me to her family. They gave me some food and showed me a street corner where I could pitch my tent, and in the middle of the night, they came out to give me a blanket and an extra jacket.
That overpass there is the highway that I need to take to get on toward Logan. But there is no shoulder on the on-ramp to the overpass over the train tracks. And the only way that I might be able to get onto a pedestrian stretch of this bridge is to go up those stairs with the cart. I really hope that the lane at the top is wide enough.
She wanted to see me at Christmas and meet my family, get married, settle on a small farm in rural Scotland, and commute to research DNA in Dundee while I looked after the animals and the children. She wanted to buy a plane ticket that night. I love you. I am here of my own choice.
Well, you can see the angle that it was sitting at when it froze. And if I were to take off my backpack and stand in front of the camera, you could probably see the angle I was lying at when I froze. Sun! Oh, that makes things 100 times better.
I talked with her in Richmond. I left the old cart on the porch.
This trip is starting to get genuinely difficult. goat's heads, having just a few hours ago finally abandoned the old trusty hand truck that's gotten me so far. I now find myself with two completely, catastrophically deflated tires, each of them filled with hundreds of extremely sharp and durable thorns. It doesn't even push anymore. I can't fix both tubes because I've only got one replacement. So I've called the Wellings, who are going to be my hosts tonight, and they're going to have to come to my rescue, which is incredibly embarrassing.
I got new inner tubes and thorn protector strips to line the tires. I got liquid sealant. I pulled every thorn out of the tires with a pair of needle-nose pliers. I'd skipped 8 miles when my host picked me up, so I had to go back and make those miles good, starting from the exact spot where I'd hit the thorns in the first place.
I just picked up another flat. I didn't get half a mile. I can still see where I just started. Eight years ago, I went to a poetry reading by Jack Gilbert. One of the poems he read was about Icarus. It was about Icarus and divorce. And the culmination of the poem was, I believe that Icarus was not failing as he fell, but merely coming to the end of his triumph. We've come to this strange place where we celebrate our breaking points. I've had a tendency over the course of this trip to fight problems with stuff rather than with behavior. If I'm cold, I try to find something that will make me less cold. If I'm having a hard time pushing the cart, I try to find something that will make the cart easier to push. Heck, even getting the cart was a thing that I got to try to make it easier to carry the weight of the water I thought I would need to get across the American West. This is in pretty stark contrast to how I've behaved on a lot of other trips, when I've usually tried to work my way out of problems by adopting a different frame of mind. I'm just gritting my teeth a little, or not gritting my teeth, whatever it is, changing the way I was acting, the way I was thinking, rather than changing the tools I was carrying, the stuff I was hauling. And the result of my attempts over the past 1,400 miles to solve my problems with stuff is that I'm now pushing a 3-foot wide bicycle trailer up the side of a road without a shoulder on the side of a mountain in Utah. I can't get this thing through doors. I can't carry it on my back. It keeps getting flats. I'm not exactly happier. It's not even letting me travel much faster. With a backpack over a multiple 1,000-mile trip, I've averaged 15 miles a day, including the days that I need to take off to rest because of the toll that kind of travel takes on the body. With the cart, my wonderful labor-saving, speed-increasing cart, so far I've been averaging 18 miles a day. The cart is winning me 3 extra miles a day. That's 1 hour of walking. And I certainly can't tell that it's making me any safer, happier, wiser, or stronger. It's the Great Basin.
Union Station in Ogden was the Union Station on the first Transcontinental Railroad. The golden spike that joined the converging tracks was hammered into the desert 53 miles west of here in 1869. The Central Pacific Line came from the west, starting in California. The Union Pacific Line came from the east, starting in Iowa, and this is the station where cargo and passengers switch from one company to the other to continue the journey. People had been trying to expedite trade between the Atlantic and Pacific for centuries, and the establishment of American control in California as a result of the Mexican-American War and the Gold Rush only made closer ties to the eastern states a higher government priority. As tensions over slavery erupted into civil war between the northern and southern states, the federal government approved the creation of the Central Pacific and Union Pacific to build the Transcontinental Railroad on military grounds, providing enormous tax-backed loans and land grants to both companies. The potential for fraud was immense. From the perspective of the men in charge of the railroads, fraud was the entire point. They'd already determined that the railroad itself would be unprofitable to operate. The money was in the construction loans, the land grants, and stock speculation. Because the loans were issued per mile of track constructed, the companies engaged in a furious race to lay as many miles of track as possible before their tracks met in the middle. On the eastern side, Union Pacific created a disguised subsidiary called Credit Mobilier to falsify construction accounting and run the government money through the stock market. They kept the fraud secret by bribing the responsible overseeing members of Congress, and the cover-up expanded through the upper levels of the federal government. It all blew up in 1872 when journalists in New York broke the story, but one of the politicians involved later became president anyway, only to be assassinated. Union Pacific survived and is currently one of the biggest companies in the United States. The railroad itself allowed for travel from coast to coast in just over a week, and seeded the growth of railroad networks across the West and a chaotic, high-stakes building boom in the following decades. The experience of space changed. For the first time, people, goods, and messages could travel from one side of North America to the other with little concern for the places they traveled through, because machinery, rather than muscle power or the wind, provided the driving impulse. For the first time, you could just sit back and enjoy the ride. The station itself was built in Ogden because Brigham Young, the leader of the Mormon settlers who had only recently waged their own religious civil war against the U.S. Army, donated the land to the railroads to ensure the station would be built in a Mormon town, and thus strengthen Mormon theocratic control of the Intermountain West. Today, the trains don't run through here. The world moved on.